Darling, you got to let me know. Should I stay or should I go? If I say that you are mine, be here till the day I die.
For many, The Clash remained the ultimate punk rock band. Indeed, in the 5 roller coaster years that the classic lineup of Joe Strummer, Mick Jones, Paul Simonon and Nicky Headon stayed together, the West Londoners transcended their punk roots and became widely acknowledged as one of the greatest rock and roll bands of all time.
So if you want me off your back, come on and let me know. Should I stay or should I go? Should I stay or should I go? Should I stay or should I go? If I go there will be trouble, and if I stay there will be trouble. So you got to let me know.
The band were inspired to form in 1976 by the impact of the early Sex Pistols. Bernard Rhodes, friend, rival and sometime business partner of legendary Sex Pistols manager Malcolm McLaren, decided to form a band to both support and compete with Johnny Rotten and co.
Bernie was the most extraordinary man that's ever managed a rock band.
Would you like to interview our manager while he's here?
Catch him while he's hot. Bernie. Bernie.
Bernie. Oh, leave him. Let him.
Sorry, that's Bernie Rhodes. Sorry about that. Come back.
He invented punk.
Bernie, had a 10-year jump on the guys. He was, 10 years older. But he was very in tune with kind of the counter-cultural movements and the legacy of counter-cultural movements. He would have known about the Paris riots in '68, or Kent State, or the Grosvenor Square riots. And, he was the one that, told the Clash, you've got to write about what you know about, what you understand.
Rhodes had been working with a band called the London SS and chose their Notting Hill-based guitarist and budding songwriter Mick Jones as his first recruit.
Mick Jones, he lived in loads of different places around London. He's brought up by his gran. And he's a total music head. Like, from the age of 11, he was going to gigs.
His childhood dream was to be a rock star. He had worked hard at his music. He had been in band after band after band. And he was a big fan of people like Mott the Hoople and the Faces, those kind of people's bands that British kids liked in the early 70s.
We got to know Mott the Hoople really well. Mick and all his mates, they used to follow up and down the country, jumping the trains, getting the trains for free, turn up the gigs, blagging their way in, hang out backstage. And that's how he learned about rock and roll, because Mott the Hoople was very good to the fans, looked after the fans and let them stay in the hotel, which is very much part of the Clash kind of myth.
He had authentic working class punk credentials.
Hectic rounds of auditions followed, at which guitarist Keith Levine and bassist Paul Simonon were asked to join.
The band that Bernie had kind of got together or kind of facilitated with Mick and Tony, they had rehearsals underneath a cafe opposite Paddington Station. And Paul Simonon turned up, not as a potential musician, but he was just there with his mate who was trying out on the drums.
What Paul Simonon really was the guy that the Clash were actually singing about. Without him, they may have been a bit of a fake, but Paul Simonon was the real thing.
More than anything is that he was fantastically good looking. He was a great looking guy. Ladies of all ages said, yes, I'll have a bit of him if he'll have a bit of me. He was a proper, beautiful man, and that was why he joined the Clash.
Bernie kind of recognised, and Mick to a certain extent, they kind of realised that even though Paul wasn't a musician, he just looked exactly the part of somebody you'd want to have in your band, and they realised he had a kind of particular kind of cool and a particular attitude anyway.
He had this attitude pose thing. He was very much the kind of how you imagine punk to look.
But the band would get nowhere without a frontman who could rival Johnny Rotten. Things fell into place for the band when they went to see a West London show by highly touted pub rock rhythm and blues band, the 101ers.
Joe Strummer's background was very different from the rest of the Clash. He wasn't even born in London, he was born in Ankara, but of course he has no Turkish blood in him. His father was a diplomat, so therefore he had this very peripatetic childhood where he would wander through various states, including Iran, and wherever his father was posted.
Yes, he came from a public school background, yes, his father was an ambassador, but, you know, people have to remember he dropped out and had travelled and had been a folk singer called Woody in Wales and this sort of thing. It wasn't a case of, you know, he suddenly reinvented himself as man of the people. He had rejected his background very wholeheartedly.
Joe was on the scene because he was playing with the 101ers, and Mick and Tony James had kind of been to check them out previously, and they kind of recognised in Joe like this sort of really brilliant frontman.
Bernie Rhodes calls up, said, "Are you in or are you out? If you're out, say so now." Strummer, 48 hours. Bernie Rhodes said no. Strummer said, "OK, I'm in."
So Strummer walked in and he knew instantly it was going to work. He just said the chemistry was there. He just said it was absolutely fantastic. It was just like straight away it all fitted, you know, perfect.
Strummer left the 101ers and joined this new gang as singer, rhythm guitarist and lyricist. By the end of June 1976, the band had a drummer called Terry Chimes, and most crucially, a perfect name, chosen by Paul Simonon. The word cropped up several times in a copy of London's Evening Standard and summed up violent, chaotic times in a Britain sliding inexorably towards inner-city riots and Thatcherism, as well as the confrontational edge of the new UK bands inspired by the Sex Pistols. The Clash, now minus Keith Levine, who later joined Johnny Rotten's Public Image Limited, signed to CBS Records in early 1977. Recording began immediately, and in March, the band released their controversial first single, White Riot.
Well, they'd been down to the Notting Hill Carnival in '76, in August '76, and there'd been the riots there. They were inspired by the fact that the black guys are fighting back, you know, against the cops. Cops are pushing around, and they make a stand. And at the time, it didn't seem to be a lot of that going on with white people who just sat there taking all the shit. And I think that's what the song was trying to say.
It's often said that the Pistols made you want to smash your head against the wall, but the Clash would give you a reason. And I think that was kind of obvious because everyone was kind of angry and mad, but Strum would be like, well, OK, we're mad, but what are you going to do about it? They were the ones that I guess gave it its kind of political depth. The Clash kind of took the ball that the Pistols gave them and ran with it.
The single's breakneck pace, barked vocals and chanted chorus show the influence of the Ramones on both the Clash and UK punk generally. The lyrics prove that Strummer could match Johnny Rotten for both anger and intelligence, as well as pointing the way towards punk's love of Jamaican culture. Due to punk's increasing tabloid notoriety and lavish praise from the music press, the Clash's sensational debut single reached the UK Top 40, despite being far too abrasive for daytime radio.
I guess my white mates were coming up with their own soundtrack, something that represented the way they felt. I mean, I had mine, I had reggae music. But every generation needs its own soundtrack.
There was a lot of confusion in the early days about what punk stood for. I mean, punk had lots of kind of right-wing notions or right-wing imagery, and there was this kind of sort of very hard, anarchic, quite extreme ideology that formed in the middle. And when they released White Riot, I mean, people got the wrong end of the stick.
When I first heard White Riot, I'm walking along the street singing this song, all my mates were laughing at me, my black mates. They're like, why are you singing that song, Rasta? They didn't understand that what Joe was saying in that song was that the white people, especially the young people, needed to have a right of their own, not against black people, but against the system.
Nothing had ever sounded like that when I heard White Riot. I mean, it sounded like it'd been played at I don't know, 1,000 miles an hour. You couldn't understand anything at all except whoa, 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 whoa. I didn't know what the hell they were singing about. And then the DJ comes on and goes, that's White Riot by The Clash.
Therefore, White Riot established The Clash's credentials as angry, powerful, and absolutely thrilling. If you never heard this kind of music before, and people in Britain generally hadn't, you'd just think, wow.
Everybody's doing still do. Nobody wanna go to jail.
By the end of April 1977, the final pieces of the Clash jigsaw had fallen into place. The solid but reluctant to riot chimes had been replaced by the extravagantly talented Topper Headon. And the first Clash album, produced by live sound man Mickey Foot, reached number 12 in the UK album charts.
At that time, the studio was very much a kind of there was a glass, and there were musicians on one side and technical people on the other side. And there was obviously, with the punk bands, there was always going to be a mistrust across the glass because of the kind of the way it separated the two halves. So the band wanted someone they knew on the other side of the glass, which was my side of the glass, which is where Mickey came in. And that was basically how the band saw his role, as being a kind of communicator.
For a start, it took punk rock in a new direction. It wasn't a wind-up like the Sex Pistols were. It wasn't good time, pie in the face sloppiness like the Damned were. And it wasn't that sort of leather-jacketed nothingness that the Ramones were. This was it was a statement. It was a manifesto. It was saying, we're the Clash. We are, as the phrase had it, the only band that mattered.
It is the sound of punk. Simply for the fact that the band stated to me very early on, we don't want you to mess with the sound of the band. This is what we sound like, and we want to record it that way.
The debut album's lyrics, written by Strummer with contributions from Jones, protested against a Britain sliding into economic meltdown, racial conflict, youth unemployment, and political apathy.
It was the first proper punk album. It was, I mean, this came, what, a good 6 months before the Pistols released their album. It was probably the first thing where you could go out and what's this punk thing all about? And you could get this album and people put it on. And the most extraordinary thing about it is it's just got these fantastic tunes on it. Like, it hasn't got a bad track on it.
It's a rudimentary and simple and raw record. It's actually quite a complex song. Even White Riot's quite a complex song. It's not just a straight Ramalama run-through. There's little bits in it, and it's cleverly done. There's a cleverness what they're doing here. The production is really, really rudimentary, but that makes it sound better. It's not overproduced. The guitars sound ace. They're just like, they're really cutting and they're really slashing. There's a great energy to it. And the lyrics are great as well. Already you see Strummer's a great lyricist.
If you wanted to know what life was like in 1977 for a young person living in Britain, you play that album 40 minutes or so and you're left in no doubt as to what it was like.
There was no messing about. The band basically played live, you know, in the studio as a setup live. And we overdubbed whatever we needed to overdub. And it was mixed, and that was it, job done. There was no kind of discussion about where we should go, really, in terms of production terms. It was simply a case of let's capture this band as they are at this moment in time.
The Clash also broke one of their own key anti-hippie rock rules. Their cover of Junior Murvin's political reggae anthem, Police and Thieves, was over 6 minutes long. More importantly, the track gave credibility to rock reggae inspiring the likes of the Police and the two-tone movement, and making it de rigueur for every punk band to try its hand at Jamaican beats.
Oh yeah, scaring the nation with guns and ammunition. Police at the ears in the street. Oh yeah, scaring the nation with guns and ammunition.
First of all, you've got to be honest about kind of white people being inspired by black music, because that goes back to a long tradition, you know, where they align themselves with the only rebel sound around, and invariably that is black music. I mean, you know, what do you think Lennon and McCartney was listening to, or Led Zepp or the Stones, you know? Difference was with the punk and black music is that no longer were they being inspired from sounds from the Mississippi Delta. We were living next door to these people. So the effect was much more direct and obvious. It wasn't disguised in interpretation.
They decided to do a cover of Junior Murvin's Police and Thieves, which was a big kind of reggae kind of club hit at that time. And that was a very interesting and, with retrospect, incredibly important thing that they did. They brought the culture of reggae and rock music together in a really, really kind of cool way.
But they're doing the punk style, so it's kind of reggae, but it's kind of punk, and I think this is really important because it shows there's an escape route for punk. It doesn't always have to be blah 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 fast punk. It's like reaching out to another culture, which is the Rasta culture, which had a similar kind of beef with authoritarian kind of thing, and saying, look, we're with you.
A song that seemingly was just set in Jamaica had a resonance here in the UK. We were all feeling the pressure.
Now, cross-cultural fertilisation, it's part of the course. But then, it was an extraordinary act of solidarity, of defiance, and of understanding that reggae was great music.
Having made UK punk's first critically acclaimed and commercially successful album, The Clash embarked on relentless touring, establishing the exhausting work ethic that continued throughout their career. Although the band were never slick musicians, they were an extraordinary live spectacle, with Simonon's mean and moody toughness, Jones's old-school rock poses, and Strummer's inspiring emotional commitment and endless energy, rousing punk rabbles all over Britain.
One thing about punk bands is they're all great live bands. I mean, every band from the Stranglers to the Buzzcocks, they're all really fantastic live. Of course, the Clash are an amazing live band. There's just something, the electricity. They have three frontmen for a start. I mean, most bands have one. Simonon's doing all these cool shapes at the side. Jones is just like living his rock and roll dream. And Joe Strummer is just so intense. He's exploding on the stage. He's doing that thing with his head up there like that. And it's, when you see clips of it now, it still looks really exciting. Just the passion and the intensity of the performance is amazing.
You were spoiled for choice at any point if you saw them of who to watch. And then the drummers were pretty good as well. I mean, just the whole package.
Whatever stage they took, they rocked. And there was always some controversy going on around the Clash that made them, each of these gigs, kind of an event of some sort or another.
But they were so good, so exciting, and they had so much to say, that very, very soon, after that first album, they transcended punk. They moved, not just punk on, but the Clash moved music on too.
They also released 3 singles between September 1977 and June 1978, which saw them quickly moving forward from basic punk rock.
The 3 singles they made between the first album coming out and Give 'Em Enough Rope were vitally important. Given the three singles, Complete Control, Clash City Rockers and White Man in Hammersmith Palais. The thing with those three singles is, at the time when the Sex Pistols were splitting up, where it had all gone horribly wrong, what it did was cement the Clash's position as the punk band. It's the weakest of the three, but it's still interesting. It's a bit of a mess as a record, but it's interesting in the sense that it had a big rock riff at its core, in the same sort of style as I Can't Explain by The Who.
See there when they come down the escalator. Now listen to the G-train accelerator. Then you realise that you gotta have a purpose, because it's gonna knock you out.
It was much more of a heavy metal type record. It had this epic element of trying to do sort of oranges and lemons in the middle, and also this thing that the Clash always did, which was, you know, making a myth of themselves. You know, Clash City Rockers. You know, giving themselves theme tunes, and it was the weakest of the three, but it was still a big sounding record.
Complete Control was the Clash writing about their favourite subject, which was themselves. The record company who they sold their souls to had forced them to release Remote Control as a single from the first album. They didn't like the idea of this. So therefore, they recorded a song on CBS about CBS releasing a Clash single against their wishes. CBS put it out, they promoted it, they marketed it, and the Clash had their first top 30 hit with it.
Another reggae classic, and the personal favourite of mine, is of course White Man in Hammersmith Palais. It's especially dear to me because I actually took Joe to the Hammersmith Palais on the night that he was inspired to write that song. And it was interesting because Joe had gone there expecting to see this kind of roots, ghetto kind of show, not realising that, you know, the people in Jamaica, the ghetto wasn't something that they aspired to. I mean, ghetto by the very nature of the word is like get out. It's something that you get out of, not get into. So when Joe saw the show at the Hammersmith Palais, it was a bit kind of Las Vegas, a bit Showtime for him. And he was thrown by this, but he came to understand that that was his own misinterpretation of where the guys were at in Jamaica. You know, people have this kind of romantic view of ghetto life, but there's nothing romantic about it.
This is a start of him really developing as a great lyricist, because he used that idea and he kind of bounced it off into a whole kind of analysis of the punk scene. But while he's kind of exploring all these ideas, he's turning into a kind of like a punk Bob Dylan, because nothing he's writing about from that point on is very straightforward.
One of the things I think that makes White Man so special is the way that the Clash were inspired by reggae, but made it their own. There was self-interpretation. So it had the feel, but it wasn't like slavishly copying reggae.
The other very important thing about that record is it's a moment where they take reggae and they take rock music, and it definitely at that point becomes another thing. It becomes, this isn't a cover of a reggae record, it becomes their own kind of Clash sound.
Expectations surrounding the second album were now incredibly high, perhaps damagingly so. Eyebrows were raised when it was revealed that the Clash were recording with American producer Sandy Pearlman, the former journalist behind intellectual heavy metal pioneers Blue Oyster Cult. Surely this American relic from the hippie era was exactly what the Clash were rebelling against.
Sandy Pearlman was an American rock producer. He'd produced primarily the Blue Oyster Cult, and he was also, more importantly, almost a staff producer for the Clash's label CBS.
So they thought, well, if we're going to compromise, let's compromise. The guys made records that we like, so they got him in. And he was a completely different kettle of fish. The second album is overproduced, and a lot of people don't like the second album. I think the second album was quite an underrated record, but I think they didn't like the process of recording it. I mean, Simonon hated it, didn't he? Because he had to do these bass lines over and over and over again. So it kind of loses a bit of the spirit of the Clash. You know, it's not as spirited as the first album, but the songs are still really great on the record.
Again, it was just part of their courage in moving stuff forward. That they weren't going to. They weren't going to be dictated to by the punk community what they were or what punk should be. They thought, okay, we're going to do what we want to do.
Mick's experimentation with various things, double-tracking guitars, backing vocal ideas, other instruments, the odd piece of piano. And as the recordings developed, more of that happened as Mick became more confident that those elements could be incorporated into the sound of the band. So that by the time you get to the stuff they're recording a year later, you're already hearing different elements and a much more confident attitude to what they want to do in the studio.
Also, a month before the release of the album, Maverick manager Bernard Rhodes was fired.
He was a man of immense energy and ideas, and a very kind of anarchic energy. He liked winding people up. He liked not paying people to teach them a lesson. You know, he liked kind of throwing a spanner in the works. He liked creating friction among the band. He liked turning them against each other. He was doing all those kind of tricks that he pulled to make the band have this kind of internal kind of frisson there, where they were forever on the point of falling apart.
As the fans got the first inklings of the fiery relationships within the band, The Clash released Give 'Em Enough Rope in November 1978. The album was far more of a traditional rock record than the first. The sound was dominated by metal guitars and lyrics that lapsed into self-parody, even as the group were presenting themselves as the last gang in town. Moreover, the majority of reviews were critical, accusing the band of selling out their punk roots in an attempt to break the States. Ironically, the album went straight to #2 in the UK charts, but flopped completely in America.
Shoot you up just for fun. Maybe he wanna die for the money. Maybe he wanna kill for his country. Never he won. He's the kind of get authority.
The first album hadn't been released in the States because it was so raw, and then Give 'Em Enough Rope, which was tailor-made. Whatever anyone says, it was aimed at breaking the American market, and it didn't do particularly well.
They had come out with this extraordinary amount of great material very, very quickly. It was just one of those situations where all the punk bands were expected to get back in the studio and make an album as quickly as possible.
Once the band, and particularly Mick, had worked out what he could do in a studio, he was one of the first, he was basically the first member of the band who realised what the studio was capable of. And he more or less assumed the role of kind of master musician come creative force in the studio. He went from owning one guitar to having 6 guitars in the studio, and different amps and different guitars and different ideas. And so the second album was always going to be different to the first.
They were developing faster than their audience. They were always developing faster than their audience. They were developing faster almost for themselves.
Tommy Gun was about army and getting the core up and all this kind of thing. That's a fantastic song, you know. When people say the second album isn't exciting, you just have to put Tommy Gun on, and it's a Sinead song with Topper's great kind of rat-a-tat drum intro and a machine gun intro and things. Again, really Ace dynamics, those different little bits all stuck together. Sometimes you wonder how they managed to remember the whole song and so many little bits in them. But that was I'd say Tommy Gun's probably the best, for me, it's probably the best song on the album.
Undaunted by the criticism, The Clash embarked on their first successful US tour in early 1979 and released the Cost of Living EP, which featured a much-loved version of Bobby Fuller's I Fought the Law. Essentially rudderless without Bernie Rhodes, they had also lost their notorious Camden Town rehearsal space, Rehearsals. The lurid death of the Sex Pistols' Sid Vicious, a close friend of the band, had made them feel that punk's original spirit was dead. Their finances were in disarray, and Paul Simonon, the band's practical joker, had turned up to one business meeting in a rabbit suit. Where most bands would have taken some time off to regroup, The Clash did exactly the opposite. They got on with writing their third album and hired yet another maverick, former mod-era DJ, Mott the Hoople mentor, and unpredictable alcoholic, Guy Stevens, to produce. The gamble paid off spectacularly.
People often say, as indeed the album critics say, that Guy Stevens produced London Calling. He didn't. He didn't produce London Calling at all. He was, in effect, the Clash's mascot at the time. Strummer and Jones were so advanced, they were so full of their own talent, that they could very much produce themselves. Now, Guy Stevens, he liked his pills, he liked his drink, and he was an emotionally charged character.
He did loads of crazy stuff, but he really entertained the band. And one of the most important things in a studio to make rock and roll records is to have a great atmosphere. If you've got a really good vibe, you'll make a great record. With Sandy Pearlman, the vibe was like dead, and they still made a good record, but it's not as good as London's Calling. And he did things like they come in and they set up, and to get warmed up before they played a song, they did Brand New Cadillac, and they just did it as a warm-up. And Guy Stevens goes, great, that's it, in the can, one track. And they go, but it speeds up towards the end. And he said, he shouts back, but rock and roll's meant to speed up towards the end. Whereas nowadays, it's just like click track, click, 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 everything's the same speed. When you listen to Brand New Cadillac, it sounds really exciting, because the bands naturally play faster towards the end of the song, because you get more and more exciting.
Still referred to as one of the greatest rock sets of all time, the double London Calling album was released in November 1979 to rapturous acclaim, reaching number 9 in the UK and breaking the US top 30. Its delayed release in America, where it hit the shops in January 1980, gave Rolling Stone magazine the excuse to vote it the album of the decade at the close of the 80s. By this time, the painted overalls and bondage trousers of the early Clash had been replaced by heavily US-influenced rockabilly, gangster and cowboy threads. And London Calling reflected that crossover between grimy London politics and American cool. The 19 tracks encompassed reggae, funk, jazz, ska, rhythm and blues and disco, as well as rock and punk.
I don't reckon there's any track on it that remotely resembles 1977 punk.
They were the first ones to break free of that kind, the shackles that punk had become, thinking that it had to be about loud, fast guitars. I mean, you can be silent and deadly too. So, but it's interesting, if you look at the first album, the difference between the first album and London Calling, they seem miles apart. But if you understand where they're coming from, there is a continuity, and the Clash weren't afraid to grow.
They were still interested in their rebel myths, exactly the same as they had been on Give 'Em Enough Rope. But what they seem to have learnt to do on London Calling is to find other people to put those myths through. Instead of it being about them, we're the last gang in town, that kind of nonsense. It was about finding Montgomery Clifts, about singing about Rude Boys, about singing about Stagger Lee, about singing about using a rock and roll rebel like Vince Taylor and playing one of his songs. And understanding that was the Guns of Brixton again, and I mean, it's just one of the most extraordinary pieces of rock music ever made.
Two vital non-musical elements marked London Calling's significance. The cover, a shot of Paul Simonon smashing his bass on stage, framed by pink and green lettering, culled from the first Elvis Presley album, is universally hailed as one of rock's defining images. But perhaps most importantly, the band insisted that the double album was sold in the shops at single album price. This gesture restored their punk integrity and made rival bands look greedy. On the other hand, CBS only agreed to the discount if The Clash paid for it out of their royalties. The Clash's greatest success simply put them into even greater debt. But The Clash were nothing if not stubborn. A year later, the band went one further and courageously jeopardized their American success. Their fourth LP, Sandinista, was, you guessed it, a triple album, again sold at single album price. Furthermore, the title referred to the left-wing freedom fighters battling against the US-sponsored military dictatorship in Nicaragua. In short, The Clash had followed their breakthrough album with a sprawling, self-indulgent, self-produced set based around savaging American foreign policy.
Someone lights a cigarette, riding in a car, and some old guy takes a swig and passes back the jar. But where they were last night, no one can remember. Somebody got murdered by the keeps forever.
Sandinista again saw the Clash, as they had before, that this time they were going into all these different musical areas with almost no regard for a theme running through Sandinista. In fact, the only real theme is the title, which of course is taken from the Nicaraguan freedom fighters who were trying to overthrow, and eventually did overthrow, the Somoza dictatorship there.
It educated an entire generation about things like the freedom fighters in Nicaragua and the harm that America was doing in Latin America.
Joe had this idea that, music was like a global radio station, and he really maximised that. And, you can see that in his lyrics. I mean, sometimes Joe's got more ideas in a couple of rhyming couplets than some people have in their whole album.
Oddly, Sandinista scored The Clash's lowest ever UK chart position, but reached number 24 in the States. So even as critics and fans rightly questioned the surplus of wacky experiments and the sloppy, muffled production, there was still great admiration for the courage of the band's risky stunts.
Sandinista was ahead of its time, there's no doubt about that. I mean, it's a dub album, it's a jazz album, it's a soul album, it's a calypso album, it's got spoken word bits on it, it's got silly bits on it, it's massively long. It's a record that I think people today kind of understand better than they did at the time.
So much great music on there, and some of the kind of rock reggae stuff they play there is fantastic. They really got that reggae thing down off pat now. Sometimes on a sunny day you put that record on, and now it's on CD, it makes a lot more sense. You can just leave it on for the whole extent of it. It really does work, there's some tracks that aren't so great, but I'd say the bulk of it's really good stuff.
I think if you listen to the Sandinista tracks now, you listen to something like Somebody Got Murdered, or Police on My Back, and you can hear that they're that far from being absolutely brilliant records, and yet they're just not, because they sound muffled and messy and you can't really hear what's going on.
As well as drawing young rock fans' attention to CIA skullduggery in Latin America, one single from the album reached a surprising new audience. Mick Jones had been particularly inspired by the fledgling hip-hop scene in New York, and Sandinista's opening track, a rap-rock crossover called The Magnificent Seven, worked its way into the sets of many black early hip-hop DJs, including the pioneering Grandmaster Flash and Africa Bambaataa.
Rain, rain, at 7 a.m. Move yourself to go again. Cold water in the face brings you back to the sharp old place. Like old nuts and your bankers too. Must get up and learn those rules. But a man, a crazy kid. Once is sun and once is deep. AM, the FM, the PM too. Churning out that boogaloo. Gets you up, I get you out. But how long can you keep it up? Give me 100, give me Sony. With phony, I'm gonna die. Indian sense, English pounds and Eskimo pants. You love! Don't stop, give it all you got. You love! Don't stop, give it all you got.
The Clash needed one more thing before finally realizing their ambitions in America: their original mentor. In February 1981, as the UK scene moved increasingly towards the new romantic era and away from early punk, Bernard Rhodes was reinstated as manager. The problem was that Mick Jones, the band's musical director and producer, didn't want him back.
Bernie Rhodes was reinstated shortly after Sandinista was completed, but shortly before it was released.
He kind of comes into the tail end and tries to revamp the whole situation, but it's probably too late by then with those ideas. The scene's moved, the scene's changed. There was a moment of time which the punk thing, you cannot get back to that time again. And his relationship with band members isn't so good either, so it does speed up the band dissolving completely.
What do we have for entertainment? Dogs kicking gypsies on the pavement. Now the news, snap to attention. Lunar landing of the dentist convention. Italian mobs, shoots a lot. Chief tourist junk gets out of hand.
It was the beginning of the end, because I think it was the first major decision in the Clash's career which Mick was kind of overruled on, and he very much didn't want Bernard back, and Joe and Paul did, and you can look back and you can see this was the beginning of the parting of ways.
A simple but inspired Rhodes idea led the Clash towards one of their greatest triumphs, when in June 1981 the band embarked on 8 intimate shows at the Bonds International Casino in Times Square, New York. And the 4,000 capacity of the venue was slashed by fire chiefs. The ensuing riots by Clash fans brought Times Square to a standstill for the first time since Frank Sinatra had played there in the 1940s. The residency was extended. The Clash invited local hip-hop stars to support, and the whole chaotic fortnight went down in Manhattan history.
Now I have a word of caution for you. The fire marshals say last night Bonds was crowded beyond its legal capacity. So if you want to see the Clash tonight for the midnight performance, you have to have Ticketron tickets or they won't let you in the front door.
Tickets to their week-long stint in Manhattan oversold by Bonds Casino. Peter Bannon is standing by live now in Times Square, where fans are lining up for tonight's show.
The Clash sold 3,500 tickets each for a week of shows. Last night, although there was no problem, fire marshals determined 1,800 was a safe capacity based on the number of fire exits. The Clash decided to honor Ticketron tickets sold nationwide for the night on the ticket. For the rest, they have rescheduled another show for each overbooked night, or given the folks the option of a refund.
That news crackled around America and made people understand, well, I've never heard of this Clash lot, but, you know, normal rock bands don't get their fans fighting in the street because they couldn't get into the gig, you know, and they certainly don't bring New York, you know, the scene, done everything town to a standstill.
It was a moment they took New York. They'd had, on Sandinista, they had Magnificent Seven, which is essentially a rap record. It's probably the first British rap record.
The hip-hop thing's starting to take off, and that had a big effect on the Clash, especially Mick Jones, because all of a sudden they're writing things like Mag 7 and Lightning Strikes, and then some of the black radio stations are picking up on these tracks and playing them on the radio stations. So that was a buzz for them to kind of embrace hip-hop and make it part of their repertoire.
The Clash picked a dozen other groups to appear with them as opening acts in the hopes of opening ears to different music. Last night it was the New York rapper stars, the disco DJs who have turned their platter chatter into an art form.
Nevertheless, the Clash had become masters of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Since Strummer had punched Jones out backstage at a UK show back in 1980, relationships within the band had been stretched to breaking point.
Strummer and Simonon have a little swing back to the punk rock thing here. They want to get the band to be a bit more punk rock street, get back to our roots kind of thing. I think Mick Jones is living in a different kind of world now.
There just seemed to be a widening rift. There was Strummer and Simonon in one camp, there was Mick Jones in another camp, and then there was Headon, who was so strung out by this time on heroin that he really wasn't any use to either camp.
At the start of 1982, the Clash tour the Far East for the first time, and they played Japan. And they're loved in Japan. They play Australia, and Australia's been waiting to see them for, you know, since 1977. So they're breaking into new territory. They're kind of going global, but at the same time, there's a fundamental problem in the band, and that's Topper's heroin habit.
It's very difficult to work with someone who's on heroin. I mean, get them in and out of countries is difficult enough. You know, if they're carrying stuff on them, everyone's going to get in trouble. You know. It's not his drumming was getting hard. He couldn't get through whole sets. It's difficult for him. Because the Clash used to play like 2.5 hours, like really massive, long sets. If you're a heroin addict, that's hard work.
It did embarrass them, Topper becoming a heroin addict, because that kind of rock decadence was everything they stood against.
Jones and Strummer fought throughout the sessions for the 5th Clash album, and veteran ex-Rolling Stones engineer Glyn Johns was asked to step in, separate the warring factions, and turn the disappointing material into a coherent album. In yet another twist, his efforts produced the Clash's biggest selling album so far. Combat Rock, released in May 1982, reached #2 in the UK and #7 in America. A focused 12-song single album, it featured the Clash's 2 biggest hit singles. Should I Stay or Should I Go, a Rolling Stones-style rock riff anthem, sounded like an open letter from its writer Mick Jones to the rest of the band. The song was destined to revive interest in the Clash long after the band had ceased to exist. But the single that finally made the band huge in America wasn't even a Strummer or Jones song, and bore no resemblance to the punk rock the Clash were renowned for. Rock the Casbah was an amusing satire on the Middle East's disapproval of Western music, driven by funky rhythm and jazzy piano, and entirely written by drummer Topper Headon. The only Headon composition in Clash history had given them their big breakthrough. The irony was that Topper would get no opportunity to celebrate. Days after the release of Combat Rock, Topper Headon was fired from the Clash. The drummer's increasingly serious addictions to heroin and cocaine had made him impossible to work with.
Producer after producer that worked with the Clash sort of have a stunned amazement about Topper Headon, and it's not just he was the best drummer. He was probably better at all the other instruments than everybody else as well. He was a natural musician. It was not attitude with him or playing in a particular, a particularly recognisable style. He was an all-round jazz-trained musician who could play anything at any tempo, in any style.
I believe that they wanted him to come back, and that they thought if he was off the road, that if he was out the way of temptation, if he was in some sort of rehab, if he got himself sorted out, then he could return, because he was the drummer of the Clash in a way that no one else was.
But the Clash's new fans barely noticed. Combat Rock became a million-selling album, despite being a largely downbeat affair, featuring a cameo from the great beat poet Allen Ginsberg and influences from funk, world music, and, as always, the band's beloved reggae. By now, the band seemed obsessed with America, and the album explored American conflicts from Vietnam to the inner-city ghettos.
If you can play on the fiddle, how's about a British chick and Rio? Speaking King's English in quotation, as down at Townsville, the steel mills rust.
It doesn't actually sound much like the Clash, does it, when you hear it? But it's got like But it's interesting because they've gone off somewhere else. It's quite different for Sandinista. They swerved off. There's a lot of New York in that record. You can hear a lot of the electro stuff soaking in there. But there's some great songs on there.
This is your paradise.
They were now a band who sounded like quite a lot of other standard rock bands. They'd lost the unique sense of morality, of power, and of seeing the musical world as broadly as they could.
What happened was, like, Mick's musical vision departed from Joe and Paul's. Mick produced and mixed a version of the album which was essentially another double album. But it was decided that by the record company and basically the other guys in the band that they couldn't put out a double, and they brought in somebody, Glenn Johns, to chop it down to a single, very much against Mick's wishes. So you have another episode in the story where Mick is being kind of overruled by the other guys in the band, even though in some senses Mick was the driving force behind the music in that band, and thus you start to see the beginning of the end.
Nevertheless, the Clash rehired their first drummer, Terry Chimes, and toured the stadiums of America with The Who. 2 dates with the 60s legends at the enormous Shea Stadium in New York in October marked 3 bittersweet Clash landmarks. The biggest crowds they ever played to, Rock the Casbah's entry into the US Top 10, and the last tour Mick Jones, the band's founding member, would ever play with the Clash.
You got to let me know. Should I stay or should I go? If you say that you are mine, be here till the day I die. Come on and let me know.
The final 2.5 years of the Clash resulted in one of the most confusing, messy and disappointing breakups of any major rock band. In May 1983, a disillusioned Terry Chimes was replaced by new drummer Pete Howard. The change proved irrelevant. In September 1983, Mick Jones was sacked from the band that he, more than any other member, had put together.
Should I stay or should I go? Should I stay or should I go? Should I stay or should I go?
All the time that they were making great music together, when they got in a room, they could forgive each other anything, you know, because the end justified the mean. But then you got to a point in the summer of 1983 where they really didn't like the music that Mick was presenting to them. Mick had got fed up with Bernie. Bernie had offered them management contracts that they wanted to sign. Paul and Joe signed theirs. Mick didn't. He wanted to run it past his lawyer. All those divisions in the band came to a head because they weren't making great music anymore.
So you got to let me know. This decision's bothering me. Decision and left you don't want me, set me free.
Clash is often perceived as finishing when Mick Jones was kicked out. Now, of course, this is factually correct because there was another album. But what was lost was this notion of the Clash.
Should I cool it or should I blow?
Without Mick Jones, there wasn't a Clash. There's absolutely no way you could have thrown out Mick Jones, Joe Strummer or Paul Simonon and had the Clash.
The Clash staggered on. Jones was replaced by 2 guitarists, Nick Sheppard and Vince White. The band reverted to a back-to-basics approach, symbolised by Strummer's Mohican hairstyle. The band toured Britain to savage reviews. A show at a festival in Athens in August 1985 turned out to be the Clash's last ever gig. In November of that year, Cut the Crap was released to a bemused public. Though the loyalty of the fans saw it reach number 16 in the UK and scrape into the US Top 100, the album received a deserved critical mauling. It was an uncomfortable mix of overpowering thrash guitars, terraced chant vocals, hip-hop drum machines, and washes of synthesized strings, with Strummer's attempts to revive the spirit of '76 sounding both outdated and self-parodic. The album title, a gift to appalled critics, didn't help.
When they recorded the album with Bernard as the producer, that Cut the Crap in Munich, I mean, it's quite clearly all that musicality and genius that Mick brought to the Clash was gone. I mean, Joe was still writing pretty good lyrics, but that was all that was left. There was everything that was good about the Clash had just sort of been poured down the drain.
That belief that you can write a very, very basic rock song and just kind of shove a beatbox over the top of it, and some synths maybe, and that somehow it's like hip-hop or it's like electro. If you ever want proof that that's not the case, then listen to Cut the Crap, because, you know, there's not a danceable moment on it. It's just a mess.
Reeling from the negative response to Cut the Crap, but finally realizing that the Clash Mark II had been a disaster, Joe Strummer finally split the band in December 1985.
The reviews, I mean, obviously the chart position did pretty poorly, but the reviews were savage, and obviously I think it was a strange moment of realisation for Joe Strummer, that he realised that he'd gone along with this idea of calling the album Cut the Crap, and that this was a gift to every critic of the band. They'd cut a piece of crap, you know, and I think that was kind of the last straw when it suddenly kind of hit him, you know, as every reviewer lined up to use the Cut the Crap pun, that of just what a monumental folly it had all been, and he just called a band meeting and essentially, you know, gave the other three their cards.
After the split, the four key Clash members resisted the temptation to reform, despite lucrative offers to headline stadium shows. Topper Headon sank further into drug addiction, but eventually recovered and now lives quietly in Dover, southeast England, having long ago quit the music business. Paul Simonon returned to his first love, painting, and now makes his living as an artist. Joe Strummer and Mick Jones reconciled enough to co-produce the second and most successful Big Audio Dynamite album, 1986's Number 10 Upping Street. Strummer appeared in Alex Cox's movie Straight to Hell, briefly joined Irish folk punks The Pogues in the late 1980s, and after a sporadic low-key solo career, formed the much-praised Mescaleros in 1999.
Tonight in the Grove.
After the demise of the Clash Mark II, I think Joe was treading water for a bit, but then when he discovered some like-minded people that would become the Mescaleros, things were really looking up for him. I mean, I was lucky enough to film the last show at the Brixton Academy, and it was fantastic. I mean, there was the passion there that had always been there, and he was no longer relying on the Clash's back catalogue. I mean, he slipped a few of those numbers in, but, you know, Joe Strummer, you know, hard man to kind of beat.
The Clash's rebel rock came back into fashion in the early 90s through an unexpected source, an advert for jeans. When Levi's used Should I Stay or Should I Go as the soundtrack for one of their popular TV commercials, the re-release single achieved something the Clash had got nowhere near while together, a UK #1. This began a series of reissues of their classic albums and constant speculation about a reunion, which was always quashed by all the band's members. Yet, in November 2002, Mick Jones, who was back in the limelight as the producer of London's coolest rock band, The Libertines, joined Strummer's Mescaleros on stage at a benefit show for the Fire Brigade Union in Acton, West London. They played versions of Bank Robber, White Riot, and London's Burning. It suddenly seemed that a Clash reunion was a real possibility. 5 weeks later, on December the 22nd, 2002, Joe Strummer died of a heart attack at his home in Somerset. just 5 hectic years, the classic lineup had released 5 albums, 8 complete sets, including the double London Calling and the triple Sandinista that had formed the soundtrack for anyone who rebelled against the establishment in the late 1970s and early 80s. Their hundreds of live shows set a benchmark for the charismatic and unpredictable excitement that the best rock and roll can offer. More than any other band before or since, they proved that punk could be far more than basic thrash, and took their fans on a journey through every form of blues-based music.
The Clash's body of work just stands up. I mean, the funniest thing about it is, like, 85% of it isn't punk rock. It's this weird kind of world reggae, dub, Clash kind of music. It's not even really rock music, a lot of it, but it's proved hugely influential. People saw that the Clash were light years ahead of their time in getting into reggae and rap and kind of almost like soundtracky music. And I reckon those records just sound brilliant today. And the later ones that were kind of dismissed by people at the time, just they make a hell of a lot of sense now.
The next generation will be from Genesis to Revelation.
They changed the face of music. They made it acceptable for white and black to combine. And that sounds a bit woolly and naive, but it's not. Not when you hear it, and not when it's taken for granted today. They moved white music out of the white ghetto. They were also the most exciting rock and roll band. They understood the duty of a rock band, more than anything, is to be thrilling. And the Clash were consistently thrilling. And that's an extraordinary legacy. Also, the body of music that they left behind. For the most part, of course it's not perfect. You know, anyone who's heard Mensforth Hill knows that the Clash were not always great. In fact, sometimes they were rubbish. But for the most part, this legacy is extraordinary, and it still rings loud, clear, true and inspirational today.
I think the Clash's legacy is really that they happened in spite of the business and not because of the business. You know, the whole DIY thing, the whole thing about a good idea attempted is better than a bad idea perfected. You know, making your problems your assets. You know, the Clash were the embodiment of all these ideas.
I think every group labours under the shadow of the Clash in exactly the same way as they still labour under the shadow of the Beatles. Every group has to live up to this band's commitment on some level or another. If they don't, you might not be able to question their music or their money-making ability, but you question their commitment and their integrity, and you can question them correctly because the Clash proved that you can do this and you can do this properly.
You got to let me know. Should I stay or should I go? If you say that you are mine, be here till the day I die. Come on and let me know. Should I stay or should I go?
Their legacy lives on through every punk-influenced band, from the pogo pop of Green Day and Blink-182 to the volatile chaos of the Libertines, the political rap metal of Rage Against the Machine and System of a Down to the stadium-friendly power of U2 and Oasis. Most of all, The Clash made you believe that music really could change the world, and change it for the better.
Stay or should I go? Stay or should I go? If I go, there will be trouble. And if I stay, it will be trouble. So you got to let me know. Decisions bother me. Decision and the rest of you don't want me, set me free. Exactly who am I supposed to be? Single side to remember which choice fits. I've been put over naked eye. Come on and let me know. Should I cool it or should I blow? Hey, real or circle. Should I stay or should I go?